Right now, we are debating whether the United States should ban TikTok. Our government says we have to do it for national security concerns. But how much of this is truly about security, and how much is it about political theater? Critics argue that the reasoning behind banning TikTok is flawed, and the implications for free speech and global digital platforms could be significant. Is restricting social media a real solution or just a distraction? This is Beyond the First. From the basement studios of WSOE at Elon University, this is Beyond the First, a podcast where we explore the intersection of media law ethics and real-world impact. I'm your host, Israel Balderas. For today's episode, we're tackling a highly contested issue: the government's control of social media and the TikTok ban debate. The push to ban TikTok has raised fundamental questions about censorship, corporate influence, and the role of government in regulating digital platforms. Here's my question for you. Should the government be able to restrict access to social media apps, even if they think meaning the government, it has to do it for national security concerns? Joining me today are two of my students from media law and ethics. I've got Donald Johnson and I've got Doug. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, we should at least tell our listening audience that we are having this debate a few days after what it appeared to me to be just a circus show, right? Congress and the former President Joe Biden signed a law that essentially said that TikTok, ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, has either have to sell TikTok to an American company or go dark by January 19th of 2025, which just happened to be a few days ago. The Supreme Court on Friday ruled that Congress could pass that law, and it was not unconstitutional because there were national security concerns. Then over the weekend, TikTok said, well, we're going to have to go dark because the previous administration was forcing us to. And then the incoming president, Donald Trump, all of a sudden said, well, I'm going to save TikTok and I'm going to sign an executive order ignoring the law that Congress passed. And then suddenly the folks over at ByteDance or TikTok were like, I'm sorry that we're going dark, but thank you, Donald Trump, for saving us. And then they came back up. And then now TikTok is back on. So, Doug, what was it like for you over the last, I'm going to say less than a week, to kind of see this thing evolve? And certainly a lot of your, college colleagues, they had something to say about this.
Yeah, so it was very, very interesting seeing it evolve on a college campus, and with us taking this media law class, understanding the rights of under the First Amendment, and so being able to challenge the Supreme Court's opinion, and with the views of some of our peers on campus. I spoke to two of them last night, and the response I got from both of them is basically the same, and that the government's being very hypocritical, especially with Trump, how he was originally against it, but only because he used it is the reason why he's no longer for banning TikTok.
Yeah, that is interesting that 4 years ago, that's exactly what he was saying, right? That TikTok was bad because the parent company is based in China. Although, Donald, you thought this was something about something different, right? That it is a kabuki dance, but there are bigger implications at stake.
I mean, it's all a kabuki dance. That's what politics is at the end of the day. But I would say the reasons that we and our government has put forwards for banning TikTok are not legitimate reasons, and put forth a lot of issues for our country's decisions going into the future. A lot of the decisions our country has made in the past have been made for national security reasons under questionable intelligence, and this is just another one. So I feel like it is our right as citizens to question this, just as people have done in the past for stuff like the Iraq War or going even further back.
You know, it's interesting, Doug, because I've been trying to sort of see the aftermath, what's going to happen. Because what Donald Trump did on Monday, he said, I'm going to extend the time period in which TikTok, right, ByteDance can go ahead and find an American buyer. He has said a couple of things like perhaps maybe the United States should own 50% of TikTok. We have people like Elon Musk that are interested in buying TikTok. I've never experienced like this much attention to an app. But then again, TikTok is not just any app, right?
Yeah, so of course, TikTok being how widely used it is, when I think it comes to who's buying it, it should be more of a global deal than a specifically US deal. Hearing the perspectives of people from other countries with large followings on TikTok, they are very unsure about the situation as a whole and how that will evolve what's to come for TikTok, for social media, not just in the US, but throughout the world. Because at this point, whoever buys it, that will affect TikTok throughout the world, not just in the US.
And I should say, I never use TikTok. I mean, I use social media, right? I use Twitter or X, Facebook, Insta. I've got my own Substack channel. I've got my own YouTube channel. But I was very uneasy, Donald, about the government, Congress passing a law, and then the Supreme Court, right? The court saying, yes, Congress can pass that law that impacts speech and it impacts creators. And I wrote this on LinkedIn. I said, the free speech implications of restricting a platform like TikTok are serious. While national security concerns deserve attention, we should be cautious about government actions that limit access to digital public spaces. And my concern is that going forward, it seems that the government has more leeway to restrict the internet and these digital spaces, right? The Supreme Court just heard a case involving whether or not the state of Texas can mandate, compel porn sites to have to do age verification. We dealt with these issues almost 25 years ago, but we're having these conversations again. Why do you think now the government is trying to creep in more and more to these digital spaces?
Well, I don't even know. They always have tried to do that to some degree, but the problem really, in my reasoning, is the government's reasoning. Like this TikTok v. Garland decision should have been a strict or a content-based law. However, it wasn't. It was intermediate, and because of that, it was allowed as a law. And I think the root of the problem is really the reasons for why it was intermediate content, or it was intermediate scrutiny over the law. It's because TikTok is seen as a Chinese company, and I mean, I personally think that like everybody in the world should have a certain amount of rights. They have a certain amount of humanity that we can all agree with. And I mean, like, we look at ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok, and their board of directors they have two Chinese nationals, one of which who was educated in the United States. We have two American billionaires and a French billionaire. And that's pretty unpolitical. That's not like a lot of Chinese influence.
And what I found interesting, Doug, is that when TikTok was going to go dark, or it did go dark, people found a way to communicate, but they found a way to communicate in the most ironic of ways. Tell me about how young people found a way around the TikTok ban.
Yep. So I think it was around 2 million Americans who, in that few days span where all the decisions were going on, switched over to this app that we call Red Note, but it's this company called Zhao Hongshu, which translates to Little Red Book, like from Mao Zedong. And
And who owns Red Note, by the way?
it is owned by, so the company's name that owns it is Zhao Hongshu, which it's not directly owned by the CCP. However, it is very, very closely related with it, and they are able to take all of the information from Red Note, and in the terms of use and service for Red Note, we give them access to our location, IPs, basically everything on our phone. We give them more access than they need. And out of curiosity to see if there was more to it than people trying to spite the government and find a new form of TikTok, I made a Red Note account, or I went on Red Note last night just to see my initial thoughts.
So you downloaded Red Note.
I did.
How easy was it for you to download Red Note here in America?
It took 2 seconds, went to the App Store, typed in Red Note. You don't even have to make an account.
Oh my gosh. Now, I have a colleague here at Elon University who's right next to my office, and she's a Chinese national. And she said that a lot of her friends in China were contacting her to go, why are all these Americans coming up on our platform? And Doug, people were learning Mandarin in order to communicate, right? Like, how crazy was that?
It was definitely interesting. I think I might get this number wrong. It's either 270% or 170%, but the amount of Duolingo learners in the US for Mandarin jumped by that much, specifically to use Red Note.
No way. I hadn't seen that.
Yep.
And, again, Donald, I wrote this on my Substack platform. I said, and this was according to Reuters, more than 500,000 TikTok users have signed up for Red Note as a form of protest against the ban, right? So the irony here is that in China, they banned TikTok because they don't want American ideas to infiltrate the Chinese. The United States was banning TikTok here because they don't want to be impacted by national security concerns. And then here are these people that are going around government regulation through other means. I mean, people will find a way to communicate.
Yeah, I think that's what's amazing about the American system, because unlike China, we don't ban social media platforms. China is the one who doesn't allow American influence, outside influence on their people to keep their people thinking a certain way. In America, I think we have pride in ourselves to not be like that. And this step by the government is a very China-esque step in taking control of the platforms that we as Americans use to communicate in this digital age.
Doug, did you communicate with anybody in China? Like, have you made like a pen pal? What would you call it? Not a pen pal, but a digital friend on Red Note?
I did not. I only used it for a few minutes, but I discovered in those few minutes so many Americans posting, saying that like they're grateful for accepting us on Red Note, and then a lot of Chinese posting, welcome, quote, TikTok refugees. We welcome you here.
TikTok refugees.
That's what everybody was saying on that app. And it was extremely interesting seeing how kind and encouraging they were towards Americans to join.
So what's the takeaway? Obviously, we spent a couple of weeks learning about the First Amendment, talking about, one of the theories behind First Amendment is the marketplace of ideas, that you want these issues to be debated, right? And then somehow the truth will rise out of that debate. Donald, what have you learned? I mean, what's your takeaway as you were learning this, but then seeing it play out in real life?
So, I mean, what really worries me is you have Mitt Romney talking to Anthony Blinken. So he's one of the senators who voted for this bill, saying, some wonder why this was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you're looking at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok broadcasts. And the actual evidence shows that the pro-Palestinian to pro-Israeli posts on TikTok were actually pretty even. The Israeli government uses TikTok or the Israeli military uses it to give a lot of information out, as well as recruiting. And there's also a lot of pro-Palestinian sentiment. But because of this, our government's afraid of this. They're trying to shut this down because our government, this is our ally, and because public opinion is rising up against it, they're looking for ways to control the public discourse.
And I found it interesting, Doug, that even Donald Trump has played down the national security concern, saying, what do I care, right? It's just young people and videos, and they're targeting, how much would China really know about this? But the bigger picture is that these digital platforms do have an overwhelming amount of power. Leave aside the national security concern for just a moment. Is there an argument to be made that the government has a positive role in at least regulating how we have these conversations in the digital space? Or would you say, get the heck out of here?
I would, in some cases, at the end of the day, I think it would be beneficial if the government did take a little step back from not just TikTok, but social media kind of as a whole. Because there, you can see that a lot of, this is not what I was really going to talk about, but a lot of government officials are older, don't understand how social media, Wi-Fi, even earbuds work. Was it? I think it might have been Ted Cruz that was asking if you are listening to a TikTok through earbuds, if TikTok has access to your brain waves. And
I'm looking it up. TikTok's return. He did say TikTok's return would be very dangerous. Earbuds. I'm looking it up to see if
he had interesting. He had very interesting takes, and looking at also I think the way that the government is approaching these issues is just immature.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, a lot of these folks don't even understand, right, AI to begin with, let alone how to regulate it. You're more of a sort of leaning on the libertarian side, right? Government, get out of my way. The law usually takes a long time to catch up to technology. Do you think eventually this will spill into the government regulating the AI space?
I'm not sure if the TikTok v. Garland case itself will have much to do. It may lay precedent for future Supreme Court decisions, but I am not a law scholar. That's for the lady on NPR to figure out.
I thought you were gonna say that's for the guy who's just teaching me to figure it out.
I mean, you too, yeah.
Doug, you get the last word. What do you think? Where are we heading in the next 6 months, a year, 2 years when it comes to the government regulating these spaces? I have said TikTok case now opens the door. It's the Pandora's box, right?
Yeah.
It's the government saying we can regulate more of the internet. We can regulate more of speech we don't like. Am I being hyperbolic?
I don't think so. I'm curious how these security concerns will play into American companies, if they will at all, who actively sell our data, like Airbnb, DoorDash, eBay, Meta, and many others. So I'm a little worried with the Pandora box that has been opened through this case. What's going to happen if the U.S. does buy half of TikTok? Then what's the control going to be like from the government? Will there be control? Will there not be? And it feels like this is a way that the government can legally infringe on free speech. And in the marketplace of ideas, should be turning the First Amendment from a negative right into a positive. A negative right into a positive right.
Yeah.
So it's a really scary thing to think about, and how soon this will all happen as well.
Donald?
Yeah. And just on that, what I think is really terrifying, because our country has a history of restricting the First Amendment for national security reasons, which is sometimes justified. But if you look at the core of these issues, if you look at the core of why TikTok's getting banned, and many other decisions by the government, it's because this company is deemed un-American. And you see the same thing with Trump here. He's trying to get rid of birthright citizenship because he sees people coming into the country as immigrants as un-American. And I think it's a very terrifying path to go down when we start restricting people's rights because of how American they are.
Here's what I would want the government to do when it comes to TikTok. Maybe limit how much time my students spend on TikTok. I think the record is like 5 hours straight. Here's what I think. The government should pass a regulation that says you can go on TikTok after you do Balderas' homework. All right, that's it for this episode of Beyond the First. I'll see you next time. And by the way, yes, we are on the internet. Free Balderas. Take care.